This happened to me when I was a teenager. I think it was the spring of 1998 when I was 14. My Boy Scout troop went hiking in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. I grew up in a very small town in Tennessee, and the boys in my troop were people I'd known my whole life, and we were all very close and knew each other very well and trusted each other. We'd been hiking for 5 days or so, and it was miserable. It rained every day, and we were all exhausted and sore and hungry and covered with blisters. The adults realized we'd bitten off more than we could chew in trying to hike a 60-mile trail, especially with the awful weather. So we'd changed course and gotten off trail to spend the night in a drive-in campground, the kind of place with hookups for RVs and picnic tables and fire pits and a central bathhouse with showers and toilets. It was a very remote area, far from town or a house. There may have been a few other small groups there, but if there were, we never interacted or saw any of them around. We were all filthy and wet, and thus very excited about taking a hot shower. It was dark and we'd finished dinner. A group of 5 of my friends, including my friend Jeremy, who, like everyone else in the group, I had known since we were babies, headed up to the bathhouse, which was maybe a quarter-mile walk through the pitch-dark woods up a worn-down gravel walking trail. I stayed behind to clean up, and after 10 or 15 minutes, followed them by myself. I had a weak little flashlight, the old incandescent kind, pre-LED, and I remember the woods were totally silent. When I got up about halfway to the bathhouse, I heard a noise to my left and looked over and saw my friend Jeremy standing by an old school manual water pump about 20 feet off the trail. The kind of pump where you raise and lower a handle to pump water up from a well. There was a strange light around him, like the moon had come out from behind the clouds. I was startled to see him there by himself in the woods off the trail. I asked him if he was already done with his shower. He seemed kind of sad and he said, "Yeah, it's all yours." I said okay, and didn't think much of it until I got to the bathhouse. When I walked in the door, my friends were all in there, and I heard Jeremy talking from in the shower. All the blood drained out of my head and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had to sit down before I passed out. My friends were freaked out and wanted to know what was wrong, and I told them what had happened. They nervously made jokes about how I must have been smoking pot. This was long before any of us had experimented with any mind-altering substances, but I could tell that they believed me. Like I said, we'd known each other forever and knew when one of us was exaggerating or playing a joke. We all waited together until everyone was finished showering or brushing teeth and whatnot, and then walked back together in total silence. When we got to the spot I had seen, he was gone without a trace. The water pump was still there though, although no one noticed it before because it was a ways off trail and obviously not in use. We got back to our campsite and went to bed freaked out. I remember not sleeping much that night. In all the years since then, I've never been able to figure out what had happened. Was there a random teenage boy in the woods who looked just like my friend? Unlikely. Did I hallucinate it? Also unlikely. Who's to say? In 1999, I moved back to Washington State from traveling around the country for 4 years. My grandmother let me move in with her for a while so I could get back on my feet again. I hated the basement of her house, always have, but it was free rent and she was cool with Chuck, my 90-pound black lab. Plus my grandma and I got along pretty well. Late one night, about 3 months in, I woke up because Chuck was moving around on the bed and he kept shaking the mattress. Then I heard him start grumping. You know those grumpy groans old dogs make when you scratch behind their ears and they love it? He started doing that. Once I realized what I was hearing, I sat up to yell at him to go back to sleep. And that's when I discovered the reason he was moving around so much. He was trying to get closer to the woman standing right next to my bed, scratching him behind the ear. I didn't scream, and I'm proud of that. But also, what the actual fuck? Where did she come from? Who was she? Why the hell was she standing right in my room petting my dog at 3 a.m.? I was too scared to ask. I did the only thing I knew how to do in these situations. I hid under the blanket. Certainly she would be gone by the time I reemerged from under the blanket, right? That's how these things are supposed to work. I waited for a little while, but when I came out from under the blanket, she was still there. So I hid under the blanket again, 3 more times, and every time I came back out, she'd still be there, smiling at me and scratching my dog's ears. The last time I was under the covers, I realized that I wasn't actually afraid of the woman. Chuck and I met under stressful situations, and because of that, he and I had a super strong bond. I trusted him implicitly. If she'd meant me harm, he would have reacted to her negatively. His reaction was clearly positive, so I figured she probably wasn't there to kill me. So I came out from under the blanket for the last time, intending to deal with the freaky woman still standing right next to my bed. Somehow I decided that turning on the light would make her disappear. I reached over and snapped the bedside lamp on. I don't know why I thought that would work. Is that even a thing? Are ghosts supposed to disappear in the light? Well, I turned on the light, and she didn't disappear, so I don't think that's a thing. By then, she'd be standing at my bedside, petting Chuck for several minutes, and I was out of ghost-busting options, so I gave up on being terrified and just looked at her. And I mean, I really looked at her. I can still see her right now in my mind, dressed up in a classy brown pantsuit with a cream-colored blouse. She had shoulder-length auburn hair, styled beautifully with these big loopy curls. She looked like she'd been on her way to a work party, and she only stopped by for a second to say hello. She was very pretty. She looked really happy. I didn't have the nerve to talk to her, or at least I don't remember speaking. But I stayed present, and we looked at each other for a while. I remember having the distinct impression of her knowing I was there, of both of us being aware of the other. Then she stopped petting Chuck and walked to the end of my bed, stood up straight and proud, and dissolved away. I mean that very literally. First her clothes, then her skin, organs, and bones, like that Nazi at the end of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I remember what her blood looked like as it dissolved away to reveal her skeleton. That should be a gross and terrifying memory, but I don't remember it like that. At the time, it felt like she was doing it on purpose, like she'd wanted to leave with the most dramatic exit she could manage. I remember thinking, this should scare the pants off me, but also, wow. Somehow, I got back to sleep. In the morning over coffee, I was going to tell my grandmother about what happened, but she'd just received an upsetting phone call. Apparently, her best friend from high school, Ursula, had passed away in the middle of the night. I'd heard stories about their teenage shenanigans, but I never saw a picture of Ursula. So I asked what she looked like. I couldn't tell you what she looked like these days, but when we were young, she had the most beautiful curly auburn hair. That's not the only weird thing that happened in my grandmother's basement, but it remains the most vivid and least scary.
Thank you for taking the time to hear this story out. It's kind of a long one. I just want to say before I get started that I love your podcasts. They really get me through my days at work. Okay, so let me start off by saying I love horror and supernatural stories. Spooky stuff is my genre. But I am also a huge skeptic, and not because I don't believe in it. I just know and understand that there are rational explanations for things, and not everything is a supernatural experience. Also, when I experience something, I want to know without a shadow of a doubt that what I'm experiencing is supernatural. So, with that being said, here's my story. I was living in upstate New York at the time. I was hanging out with a couple of friends of mine, Katie, who was an 18-year-old virgin, and Andre. We were chilling at Katie's house, waiting for some other friends of ours to get out of work. All of us were going to get together and go to a bonfire later on that evening. I don't know if it was adolescence, ignorance, or all of the above, but we decided that it would be brilliant to make a Ouija board and try it out. So before I get into this, let me paint the picture for you. Some houses in New York have a platform as soon as you walk in the door, and directly in front of it are short sets of stairs. To the right, the staircase went up. To the left, it went down. Downstairs was just one long hallway that had a couple of bedrooms and a laundry room. The upstairs was pretty open. From the platform when you walk in, you can turn to your right and see the living room. Then to the left of that was an open dining room area. The kitchen was right next to it, separated by a wall with an open doorway. Then to the left of the stairway, there was a hallway that had some bedrooms, one of which being Katie's. I'm going to give you small details that become relevant later in the story. Katie had a water jug in her dining room area, like the kind you see at doctor's offices. And she also had a dog. The dog was one of those dogs that barked a good amount when you first met it, but once you pet it and got to know it, it was super chill around you and just kind of hangs around the house, doesn't really make a sound. So Andre had known Katie for years. It was a small town. I was new to the area, but Katie and I had been chilling together every day all summer. So the dog was familiar with everyone in the house, and no one else was home. So Katie looks online to find out how to make a Ouija board and how to have some good activity. She read that having all of the elements helps connect you to the other world. So I watched her tear a regular piece of notebook paper out of a spiral notebook, rip the perforated edge off, and write out in black ink with a regular black pen a Ouija board. We used a penny as a planchette. We had a bowl of water. We grabbed some dirt and rocks from outside. We lit a candle, and we opened a window. Water, earth, fire, wind. We had it all set up. We then taped the Ouija board to the living room coffee table and sat down to start our conversation with the dearly departed. At first, nothing really happened. The planchette didn't move. Then a little while into it, we start talking to a spirit who told us that he was a young boy who died in the house by the hand of his mother. I know I wasn't moving the planchette. Katie was pretty freaked out, so I was fairly certain it wasn't her, and so that just left Andre. I really thought he was just messing with us. Until we asked the question that you should really never ask. We asked for it to give us a sign. As soon as we asked, the water jug bubbled in the dining room. We looked at each other and just kind of shrugged that off as mere coincidence. So we ignorantly asked for another sign. Sure enough, the dog started losing his mind downstairs, running back and forth, growling, barking. We were pretty freaked out at this point, but still not entirely convinced. So we asked one more time. And I think we aggravated it because right as we asked, the edge of the Ouija board lifted and in doing so ripped the paper. Katie and I immediately got up, took our hands off the board and said, F this, we're done. So Andre kept his hand on the penny as it continued to move. I had walked away, my back was to the table, so I can't tell you what was said, but when I spoke to Andre about 10 years later, he claims that the penny moved on its own and his hands felt as if they went numb. So Katie and I sat back down at the table, put our hands on the penny, and said goodbye. We read that if possible, you're supposed to destroy the board. So I brought it outside, held the paper up over an open lighter, and waited for it to ignite. I waited for a good 30 seconds. When nothing lit, I turned the paper over. It was black. I touched my fingers to it and swiped, and the three of us watched as the black wiped right off of the paper. It was still fully intact, not burnt in the slightest. I started at the edges, trying to burn this paper. It eventually caught. The corners burned back slow, like the embers of an incense. Eventually, I burned all that I could without burning myself, and all that was left was either yes or no. I can't really recall which one. So I just let that little piece go. I wish I could tell you that's all, folks. That's the end of the story, but it's not. What happens next is why I mentioned that Katie was a virgin, because that purity is said to make you more susceptible to seeing and experiencing things that other not as pure people may not be as sensitive to. Like I mentioned before, Katie and I had been chilling all summer. She had just got a brand new cherry red Volkswagen Beetle. Her and I had been cruising around all summer in this car, never had one issue with it. So the guys arrive and Andre hops in their car and Katie and I follow them alone in her car. Remember, this is upstate New York. The roads are dark, no street lights, they are winding. So we're about a car length away, maybe two, from the guys in front of us. I didn't have a license at the time, so Katie was driving. All of a sudden, Katie stops talking and starts to point to the front right of the car at something outside on the side of the road. The look in her eyes is pure terror. She's stuttering as she says to me, Nicole, I keep seeing a little boy on the side of the road. He looks just like your little cousin, Josh. So my little cousin, he was about 4 to 5 years old at the time. He's very fair complected, very pale little kid. So as a natural skeptic, I'm thinking that she's just imagining things because she's still freaked out from the Ouija board. So I say things to try to calm her down, mostly because she's behind the wheel of the car and we're going 60 on a dark, winding road. She's just repeating herself at this point, pointing in that same direction, saying she keeps seeing this little boy appear on the side of the road. And then I start to freak out when she starts crying. Not like 1 or 2 tears, no, like the full-on sob, makeup smearing, snot running cries, and my only thought at this point is, well, shit, this bitch is crazy and she's driving the damn car I'm in. So I continue to tell her, trying to calm her down, Katie, it's all right, calm down, we're gonna be there soon, your mind's just playing tricks on you from earlier, it's just your imagination. As I finish my sentence, the lights on the dashboard of her car start to go on and off. I stop talking, look at her. She's got a death grip at 10 and 2 on the wheel. There's no way she's touching anything to make the lights go on and off. She glances at me and I can feel the color in my face drain as the windshield wipers start to go on and off. The dashboard lights continue to flicker. The headlights are fluttering. And then finally, the radio starts to turn on and off. Stations are changing. There was nothing but silence in the car between her and I. The terror was loud enough. We didn't say anything. All of the horror she felt had just been validated, and I could feel the panic in me start to rise as the horror starts to settle in my mind that whatever she was seeing was not at all in her imagination, and that we had opened some kind of portal that clearly didn't get closed. Neither of us were saying anything. This all happened in the matter of 30 seconds. But it felt like the silence that comes with holding your breath right before you let out a blood-curdling scream. The guys called her phone. She had them on speaker, and they asked us, "Why are you flashing your lights at us?" And that was it. The silence was broken, and the screams came out. Her and I both are yelling and panicking into the phone about how we aren't touching a goddamn thing, and the car is doing all of this on its own. The guys tell us to pull over, and we hopped out of that car so fast. We booked it straight to them and repeated our screams as we told them everything we just witnessed. We stood around and talked for a few minutes, but we were in the middle of nowhere on a dark road, and we all wouldn't fit in the car with the guys. So really, what could we do? We had to get back in the car, and for the rest of the drive and the rest of the time that I chilled with Katie, not one electrical issue had ever arisen in her car again. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time and listening to my story.
I've been renting my house from a family friend for several years now. Since day one, I knew it was haunted. I could feel the energy change the moment I stepped inside, but I could also tell it wasn't necessarily negative. I'm not a stranger to the paranormal, so when little things would happen, like items moving or items going missing, inaudible conversations in other rooms, or even my dog looking at an empty corner or wall, I wouldn't usually react. I even nicknamed the ghost Bernadette and would jokingly ask her or it to stop. However, within the last 6 months, the activity has intensified. I've had individuals in my house who are complete skeptics, but they have witnessed glasses thrown across the room and shatter everywhere, pictures falling from the wall, and the sounds of someone or something walking down the empty hallway, and hearing people talking that weren't there. I even had to have my brother check that my gas alarm was still active because of the random areas in the house smelling like rotten eggs. Halloween night, I had a very small get-together, about 6 people. And one of my guests brought her wife, who I had only met one other time. While my friends were playing games and passing out candy, my friend's wife, we would call her Emily, pulled me to the side, seemingly upset, and stated she needed to discuss something with me. She first asked if I knew about Mary. I'm running names through my head that my coworker had mentioned, and I've never heard of a Mary. I obviously tell her no, and she proceeds to tell me a very detailed story about my house. She explained that I had 3 spirits in my house: a spirit named Mary, a spirit named Franklin, and that I had a spirit who was always with me named Gary, she thinks. She stated Mary had died in the house a long time ago. Franklin had died on the land before Mary from a plowing accident and was still in his death state. She also confirmed my suspicions of extra activity. A few nights prior, in the middle of the night, I was in bed and jumped up from my sleep from a huge bang against my bedroom wall and a picture falling onto the end of the bed. Obviously, I was startled, and especially spooked when I could see the indentation in my wall from what appeared to be something that hid it. I jokingly said, "Not cool, Bernadette," and went back to bed. Emily knew about this. She knew he had hit my wall and said it was Franklin's way of trying to get my attention. that when things are thrown in the house or fall off the wall, that it was Franklin. Apparently, he is angry because I don't react. In my mind at this moment, I'm thinking, who the hell is this woman? I don't know her and I haven't told anything to her wife about my creepy house. So I ask, how do you know this stuff? And her response, still, as I am saying this, chills me to my bones. She says, because he is standing right behind you. My first reaction is to look behind me. There's nothing. Second reaction is to ask, why can't I see him? He doesn't want me to. Third reaction is, why does he want to scare me? He wants attention. Since that night, the activity in my previously mildly creepy house has been off the charts. I don't get spooked easy, and I've seen things that you will see on horror movies, but my house is scary. The energy has shifted. I feel like I am constantly on fight or flight mode. I am typing this at work because I feel like someone is constantly looking over my shoulder, and I don't want whatever or whoever it is to read this. It's just my dog and me in the house, and even he has been acting differently. I've caught him multiple times sitting in the hallway, looking at nothing, whimpering, and then he runs under the bed. I literally have to drag him out. When I'm changing clothes or taking a shower, I feel uncomfortable because I feel someone is watching me. The house is nearly unbearable to live in at the moment, and I've been at a loss of how to make it go back to my mildly spooky house. I have used Sage twice now, and I think it just pisses Franklin off. With that being said, I have amazing friends and connections to the historical site in my town. With some research, I found Mary and some other interesting details. Mary Frank, 48, died suddenly in my house on August 26, 1919, from neuralgia. Her spouse, Charles Frank, held the funeral in my house. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a Franklin yet. However, before the Franks occupied my house, it was a stable for horses. It could be a huge coincidence that Mary's last name is Frank, and maybe Emily didn't get a clear message. I'm honestly not sure. I have asked her since, and she still thinks his name is Franklin. She even came back to my house and told him to stop, but he won't listen. I do plan to keep researching the area for a man named Franklin, but I'm not sure there will be any documentation. Another interesting thing is that I do or did know a Gary, and he has actually been brought up before. Gary was my mother's best friend's husband, who passed away from a heart attack when I was young. At the time, we lived on 20 plus acres of land, and he loved to go hunting on our property. When he passed, it was his wishes to have his ashes spread on our land. I was told many years ago that Gary watched over me. I know the activity in my house is increasing. I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe because I'm more aware now. But I don't feel in danger. I never have because I know Gary is there protecting me. I'm going to attach a picture of Mary's obituary along with the lovely spot someone or something put in my wall. I'm sharing this maybe for insider, just an interesting read. If you all have any input, I would love if you reached out.